us, those of us in the center now, that all we must do, in his time in 1967, Starehe was not an academic giant, but was a place of shaping character. And all we must do is focus on our character, and everything else shall be given unto us. May the Lord rest his soul in eternal peace.
Archbishop Philip Anyolo, the entire clergy, Mama Barbara and Michael, family and relatives, distinguished mourners. We learned from school those days under Dr. Griffin to go by what the director says. So I think the director conspired with another old boy who is the MC, that because in another forum they are all under me, I should say something. So perhaps let me start by acknowledging the entire Starehe fraternity, both boys and girls, alumni, to stand up wherever you are, please. Thank you very much. Thank you. We all know that Professor Magoha had his family and relatives, but we also know that he had many brothers and sisters in the Starehe alumni. I had a personal relationship with him, but I want to say a few things about his relationship with Starehe. I thought one of it the director would have mentioned. He was very close to Dr. Griffin, and in 2005, that evening, one evening when Dr. Griffin passed on, and I called him, and he said he wanted to take charge of looking after the remains of Dr. Griffin. And I think he supervised the entire work of preserving that body in a way that he used to tell us it could stay for 200 years. And that is how close he was to Dr. Griffin. The second one that I remember about Starehe is the day he was sworn in as a cabinet minister. He actually called me and told me to pass a message to the director that now that he was a minister for education, the management team and the director needed to work hard, because from where he sat, he could not be seen to give any favors to Starehe boys. And that was a principle in which we all knew Professor Magoha to be. I recall an event, again a sad event, when he lost his mother, and I went to Marenyo village in Gem for the burial. And when he saw me, he asked me, "Why didn't you tell me you were coming?" And I told him, in the Starehe Brotherhood, I cannot tell you I'm coming to bury my mother. I just show up. And although many people think that Professor Magoha never smiled, he actually smiled and laughed. In his days as a VC, especially in the early days as the Vice Chancellor of University of Nairobi, he had difficulties with the Ministry of Education. And the Minister for Education was the late Saitoti. And I'm the one he talked to who brought them together because he needed funding from the ministry. Perhaps many of his secretaries at the university will recall I used to come there for a cup of tea. Now they know what we were plotting as brothers, to have the Ministry of Education support the University of Nairobi. On the day that Professor passed on, and I've shared this with Barbara and Michael, I was having lunch with a friend of his. And this friend was very busy sending money to Professor Magoha. This was at 2:30 that afternoon. and he wanted to M-Pesa to help in burial arrangement of his younger brother. So he sent the money successfully, and immediately Professor called back to say thank you. So my friend left the lunch table and went out to pick the call and came back and said, I just sent money to Professor. He was just acknowledging because he felt he was rude at a lunch table leaving. So in the evening when the news started coming in and somebody called me, said, Professor Magoha has passed on, I said, no, it's not Professor George. It is his younger brother. Because I did not believe that being privy to a conversation at 3 o'clock, somebody can then leave us 2-3 hours later. But that's what life is all about. That we live in this world at the grace of the grace of the Almighty. And that every minute we have is a borrowed minute. And that we need to do what we can to leave this world better than we found it. Fare thee well, our brother, Professor George Magoha.
Thank you, Peter. Professor Mwanda was already here to read the eulogy, but he is in the program as a friend and representing friends. I'd like him to take very few minutes because we're really running out of time. I've been warned about it, and I'd like to know, you can give us advice. We gave due protocol allowance for the governor of Nairobi in case he comes, so he sent his representative. We'd like the representative, if he's here, just to, or she is here, to come and tell us here in the front so that we can continue with that. And the rest, I think, we're supposed to talk are close by. Thank you.
On behalf of our departed friend, colleague, mentor, teacher, I stand here to read just 1 or 2 sentences about George as a friend. As friends, we shared many common beliefs and values. Toil and not ask for any rest. Labor and not ask for any reward. For at the end of the day, the Lord shall tell you, well done. Both of us cherished hard work and loyalty to authority. As a mentor, he enabled growth of knowledge and ideas. He enabled knowing what was not and what was wanted. He was credible, a positive role model, genuinely interested in his mentees as an individual, and shared experiences and insight. He had a commanding stature. He exuded power and authority. His presence would be felt, and his friends too would know what is expected at any occasion. He made friends feel that there is something worthwhile in them. Think only of the best, to work only for the best, and to expect only the best. As a colleague, he expected no mediocrity. His assigned responsibilities to be done were to be done the way he would have wanted to do it himself. Just as an example, he assigned me the responsibility of being the director of the University of Nairobi Institute of Tropical and Infectious Diseases and he gave me the following commands: grow income, get international students, train researchers, capacity build to make Unity a level 4 institution. In biosafety and biosecurity, yes, one of the important things which I must mention, we trained researchers from arid and semi-arid lands and chose those who are providing care services in health facilities from that region. The objectives were to improve implementable aspects of research and to demystify research as an elitist domain. At the end of 1 year, we had managed to train 180 persons. In capacity building, which became very useful during the Ebola crisis, we trained 244 laboratory staff, including mortuary staff, to be able to manage hemorrhagic fever such as Ebola. We trained workers in rapid response in cases of emergence of fever and biosecurity. To us, success was what we use, what we chose, what we are, what was true, and what to do, and more importantly, what to give. A friend indeed he was, and I must say I was among those who accompanied him to his in-laws to be. Rest in peace, Omore, till we meet again.
Thank you. Yesterday, at the residence of Professor Magoha, it was hosted by members of his profession, and the master of ceremony was Dr. Alwach, and he made all kinds of jokes, and it was at the expense of politicians like myself. How we have not gone to school, we cannot read speeches, and those sort of things. So I want to give him a chance now to prove his prowess in an area where he was, criticizing us. And I also have requested him that there must be several doctors who are here that we have not acknowledged. And he has reminded me that, you see, you've only acknowledged politicians. Where are the doctors? And since there's a Swahili saying which says that when you're still giving birth, you don't disrespect the midwives. So I don't know when I'll next be at his clinic or when I'm on a table when he's a surgeon. So most respectfully, sir, I ask you to acknowledge the doctors and tell them that it is not out of slighting them that I had not mentioned them. Thank you.
God is good, and all the time, the clergy, the family of Magoha, all protocol observed. But I'm going to break the protocol a little. I'm going to request you to have a 10-second medical or biological break, and also in honor of Magoha to stand up for 10 seconds and stretch yourself. Thank you very much. I'm sure now you're awake to listen to me speaking. You may sit down. It's important that you listen to me. Okay, thank you. I'm here to present a very important constituency. I represent the doctor. It's important to note that Barbara and Mike are also doctors. And I represent very important doctors. I can't mention them because there are very many. And more important, probably this morning, I'm the most important speaker because I'm especially anointed I'm representing the doctors, but I also come from game, and which is a very important, the only location you can find in English dictionary. The only interest, the only important verse that has never been included in the Bible is do as I say, not as I do. So yesterday I told people not to read their speeches. That was me saying. Now I'm doing the opposite. I'm going to read a speech. To the family of the Magoha, on behalf of the medical fraternity, I bring our sincere condolences on the loss of our dear colleague. We know the medical profession is used to witnessing death, but that does not take away the pains of death when it takes one of our own profession. Death, taking a precious life like that of Magoha, is very painful, and extraordinary doctor he was. It is said that to lose people we love is very painful, and though we say that we cannot lose love because death cannot touch love. The sorrow we feel when we lose a loved one is the price we pay for having them in our lives. Magoha was a man of good heart, cared about friends and family. He contributed to the development of every single person he met on his path. He mentored many and sowed the seed of greatness in many things. He was an inspiration to many people. Although nice things are said at funeral like today, it is sad that most of us will not be able to hear the same things said to us. He was always an inspiration to all. He said what he meant and meant what he said. He lived beyond humans, and his thoughts were always revolutionary. While we mourn a colleague, we pay tribute and celebrate a life well lived, a life committed to building excellence and standards in every way. Not many doctors leave such a legacy of such dedication to excellence. He will be missed, but never will be forgotten by those who are fortunate enough to have known him. He made many people great. Some people are born great, others made great, others have got greatness thrust upon them. But he was a great man and made people great. Thank you for leading a great and fulfilled life. The rivers of sorrow. Life is like rivers. Eventually they go where they must. Drinking from the rivers of sorrow sustains a different kind of life. The river is hidden from the rest of the world. Tears drip from my chin and fall into an endless flow of liquid love. The river sparkles with beauty for life and death. Even as the rivers and the sea are always one and meet eventually. Death is not the end of the journey, but the beginning of another journey, a journey that we shall all take, and we shall all meet the end. Rest in peace, our departed friend, Omore.
Thank you, Daktari. He speaks so well, he should have been in politics, but I think you're more useful in your calling. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of former Minister for Education, our senior Professor Ongeri, and I'd also like to acknowledge, if I didn't by any chance, Senior Fred Gumo, former Member of Parliament for this area. It's now my privilege to invite my former colleague, CS Farida Karone, to give a tribute on behalf of all the former colleagues of Professor Magoha. Thank you.
Thank you, Raphael. Please allow me to observe the protocols that have already been set in the interest of time. Dr. Barbara, Dr. Michael, and the extended Magoha family, on behalf of the colleagues, the former colleagues of Professor, and we are led here by the former head of public service, Dr. Joseph Kinyua, former colleagues in cabinet, former PSS, and technocrats who worked with Professor. We bring our deepest condolences to the family, and we want to tell you that we stand with you during this difficult time. Dr. Barbara, if you allow me, permit me to thank His Excellency the President, because when Professor passed on the 24th of January, as former colleagues, we quickly came together to support the family, and we were given great support by the government of Kenya. So I want to thank His Excellency the President. I want to specifically mention, through the Minister for Interior, the PS for Interior, Dr. Omolo, the PS for Education, Dr. Belio, and through you, Dr. Belio, to the Kenya Literature Bureau, because without your support, it may not have been possible to pull off this function. So we want to honor you and appreciate the contribution and the support you gave us as former colleagues of Professor. As former colleagues, Professor served with us and led by doing. What we learned from Professor is that if you have chosen public life, then you had better be ready to serve with honor and integrity. And I think all of you who have spoken about how Professor always tried or endeavored to be a dignified man, to lead with honor and to lead with integrity. The other thing that he taught us is to always be dependable and trustworthy. And as former colleagues, Dr. Barbara, I hope you have found us trustworthy and dependable, because that is what Professor would have expected us to do. During the meetings of the committee, and I think our colleague Raf will say that, we always were saying, if Prof was here, he would have thought we were jokers if we behaved this way. So can we get a little bit more serious? So Prof was, it is true, people thought he never smiled. But in our chit-chats while we were waiting for cabinet or waiting for meetings, he was always a very humorous person, he was very kind, and he was a very, very loyal friend. Speaking from personal experience, I lost my father in 2020 October, and a year later I lost my sister. On both occasions, he traveled all the way to Nandi to come and support my family. So that is the person that Professor Magoha was. He was very loyal, very dependable. So as we mourn him, if he leaves anything behind, those of us in public service, if you can just be what he was, this country will change like you can't believe it. The other thing, apart from the integrity, the efficiency and effectiveness that Nick spoke about, this is a man that you could not fault. He would be very rough on you, by the way, once he lost his title. And I thought he was going to beat me up. You know, he was a very heavily built man. Then he came and told me, Farida, how can I lose my title and you're the Minister for Lands? Because we were very good friends. I asked him, Prof, can you calm down? What do you mean you lost your title? Then he said that he had gone to City Hall and found that somebody had changed his title into his name. So I told him, relax. The custodian of title to land is the national government. And for as long as I'm here, your land will not be lost. So I actually got his file, kept it in my office, and made sure that it was digitized. So I told it, even if I'm not Minister for Land, your title will not be lost because I've digitized it. So that was the man who Professor Magoha was. He would not have allowed you to be mediocre in the things that you did, or to take things lightly. He used to say that public service is a calling, and indeed it is. So when you're in public service, he would say, don't worry about resting. There will be plenty of time to rest in the grave. So he was always on his feet. I'm sure you saw him. He went to almost every school in Kenya. I don't remember a school that Professor didn't go to. There's a photo that I had wished that we had used. Him coming out of a very tiny Manyata. And you know, he's a very built man, so he had to squeeze himself into the door of the Manyata. That was Professor Magoha. He served by doing. He led by example. He did everything in his power to make sure that our country was a better place because of the service that he offered. So if we were to learn anything from him as servants in our country, not just public servants, anybody, if you're a CEO of an organization, if you're a teacher, if you're a church minister, whatever you are, always remember to do things in the interest of humanity, because that is what Professor did. And as we all spoke and prepared for his funeral, I couldn't help but thinking, what will people say at my funeral? I think I can leave you with the same question. What will people say at your funeral? Will they remember your good deeds, or will they remember the terrible things that you did on behalf of other people? I thank you for your attention. Barbara, we continue to condole with you. We'll support you to the end. And we pray that God may give you grace. For Professor, we pray that God may be pleased with him and rest his soul in paradise. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, my sister. There's the representative of the Embassy of Mali who has got a message, and I would like you to please come now so that then you can present your message. And I'd like to confirm if there's a representative from the Embassy of Nigeria. The Embassy of Nigeria. Is there a representation here? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much to give me a floor to speak behalf Embassy of Mali. Now I am reading the letter that the Ambassador of Mali in Addis Ababa sent to Dr. Barbara, Honorary Consul of Mali in Kenya. Dr. Barbara Magoha, it is with deep sadness that I learn of the death of your husband, Professor George Albert Magoha. I bow to the memory of the Professor Magoha, who will live in irrepressible void within your family. In this moment of emotion and contemplation, I would like, on behalf of His Excellencies Abdoulaye Diop, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Mali, of the entire staff of the embassy, and on my own behalf, to send you and your family my most heartfelt condolences. May the Lord, the Almighty, in His infinite goodness, have mercy on his soul and welcome him into His paradise. Amen. I remember to you my feelings of deep compassion and sympathy. Please accept Dr. Barbara Magoha, the expression of my distinguished consideration. Thank you for your attention.
It's very gratifying to see former ministers of education in this country who are able to make it come, and I've just been told that the Honorable Olo Aringo, who was also former Minister of Education, is in our presence. Thank you for coming. Before we go to the side of the government, which we have a special tribute to give to, the Member of Parliament for Game is actually listed to talk in Game. But being the Member of Parliament for Game, and I'm going to Game tomorrow, I just want to be in his good books. So I'm going to ask him, please say one word to welcome the people to Game, where Professor Magoha comes from. And on the same vein, I want to thank him for his personal assistance. Beyond being a Member of Parliament for Game, he has been very supportive to us.
God is good, and all the time. To the family of the great Magoha, to Auntie Barbara and Dr. Mike, I'm here to eulogize your loving one, Professor Magoha. Sometimes, when I was looking at Professor Magoha, I was wondering whether those who have gone to school, the professors who are here, have been able to do research on the correlation between management competence and somebody who has studied medicine. Because my little perception has always been that those who study medicine are better in the hospital. But Magoha proved it otherwise. That is an enigma in management competence. So we'll miss him for his brevity, for his forthrightness, for his firmness. I remember one day, one of the MPs from Sierra had a bit of argument with him. So he called me and asked me, Elisha, how do you do these things? This colleague of yours wants me to go to jail. He wants me to do something I can't do. Incidentally, this gentleman had gone with some Chinese to Professor Magoha's office looking for tender. So when I finally put them on a telephone conversation, there was a heated argument between the Member of Parliament from Malego and Professor Magoha until I had to cool them down. In the midst of all this, he told my colleague that, you know, there are procedures. And at my age, I don't want EACC to come to my home. I know at least he was honest and forthright from that story. The Bible tells me a few things. Dr. Barbara, if you read the book of Psalms 39 verse 4, it says, Lord, show me my end. Show me that my life is like a phantom. May all of us who have come to eulogize Professor Magoha remind ourselves that this life is like a phantom. And the same Bible, first book of Chronicles 4 verse 9, the prayer of Jabez. May that prayer of Jabez take care of your home. May the Lord protect you, expand your territory, you and Michael. And I know that for sure, the Lord that takes care of widows, as put in Revelation 21 verse 3, will wipe your tears. May the good Lord that I worship rest Professor's soul in eternal peace. Bonacious, now that you are here, convey our heartfelt, convey our message to the President that we are grateful for the support he has given us. And the PS of Molo, Raymond, I'm very grateful that you and Owalo, you have walked this journey with us. And for all of you, I welcome you to game. Don't carry stones, because if you throw a stone, it could land on the head of a professor. Thank you.
Well, you should have added that you don't need to carry a stone because we have enough over there. Just to take the cue from where Honorable Member of Parliament has left us, I know we're going to have a vote of thanks by one of us, but on behalf of the Magoha family and the extended family relatives, I'd like to especially acknowledge the very, very gracious help and assistance that we received from the government of His Excellency President William Ruto. Please do convey to him our gratitude and for standing in the gap to help with respect to the logistics, to help with respect to finances, and we cannot thank him enough. I like to especially note the very gracious calls that we received, the visits that we received from the Deputy President, the visits that we received from CS Owalo, and so many others in this current administration. I also like to personally thank Mr. Raymond Omolo for coordinating all the logistics in Yala game. We have monitored, and we are grateful to the provincial administration that come under you that have done their bit. by the same token, I like to be able to acknowledge very, very generous support that was extended to us by the fourth president, President Uhuru Kenyatta. He took a personal interest. He actually did come to the residence of the Magohas, and he made substantial financial contributions towards this funeral. I also like to acknowledge the fact that our former cabinet colleagues and present members of the cabinet made financial contributions towards this funeral, and we really don't take it for granted. We thank you, thank you, thank you most sincerely, sirs. Now it's my duty. I don't know if the Embassy of Nigeria is represented as was anticipated. I've not heard from them, so we can proceed. Now it's my responsibility and duty to request the Minister for Education, Honorable Ezekiel Machogu. Sir, it's your turn to talk, and we thank you most sincerely for honoring your predecessor by your distinguished presence. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, MC, Your Grace, the Archbishop, the family, Dr. Barbara and Michael Magoha, and all of us. Before I make my statement, I want to acknowledge my colleagues who are here. We have the CS National Treasury, Professor Juguna Ndungu, please stand. And we also have my friend Erio Duwaro, who is going to make a statement on behalf of the Kenya government. Please stand. We have several permanent secretaries with us here, and I want to request in a second Brother Umoru to come and introduce the principal secretaries who are here in 1 minute before I proceed.
Thank you, Waziri, and thank you, MC Honorable Tuju. To the family of Professor Dr. Barbara and Dr. Michael and the extended family, first of all, receive my sincere condolences and best wishes as you go through the last journey of Professor. Mine is very simple. I'm Raymond Omolo, the Principal Secretary in charge of National Security, Internal Security and National Administration. And they are my colleagues. I would ask them to stand up so that I introduce them. So there is Dr. Belio Kipsang, who previously worked with Professor and is currently the Principal Secretary for Basic Education. Then there is Dr. Beatrice Inyangala, who is the Principal Secretary in charge of Higher Education. I think that's it, Waziri. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Principal Secretary. Before I make my statement on behalf of the Minister of Education, I want to make a disclosure. The disclosure I want to make is that 3.5 years ago, Professor Magoha, when he was appointed the Cabinet Secretary Education, he picked a young man who was then teaching, who was a lecturer in the University of Nairobi, the Faculty of Law. That young man happened to be Paul Machogu, my very own son. Professor Magoha has worked with that young man for the 3.5 years. Each and every place that he went to, he was with that Machogu Jr. And of course, as a father, I had imparted the necessary Christian values to that young man, but I'm happy to inform you that the work ethics that Magoha taught that young and many others are such that as a family we really appreciate. Because of that young man, we became good family friends, and actually in 2020, when he was CS Education, he came all the way to Kisii and from there on, we remained as very good friends. Even in August, as he was writing his handing over notes, not knowing that the one who would be able to take over from him was the father of that young man, the one who did the handing over notes was Paul Machogu. So when again, on the 27th of October, as I was taking over from him, Magoha, I confirmed that indeed Mzee was a true Christian because he had a rosary, one that he used to carry everywhere that he went, and also another one that he kept in the office. Told me the challenges in the means of education you can only overcome once Jesus, the blood of Jesus, surrounds this office, and once the Father in heaven will be able to hold you by the hand. And ever since that time, he has been my advisor, and indeed, he has been my very true friend. Each and everything that we have been able to do in the ministry, I've been very closely consulting with him. The other disclosure I want to make, he did make a request, the family knows about her sister, said, yes, I've served the government, please let the government do a PCD during his last days, and Moro is here, His Excellency the President of the Republic of Kenya, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, was able to direct to that request, and the sister with the Public Service Commission, we have been able to do as directed by His Excellency the President, and I'm happy to say that the request was accepted by His Excellency the President, and we have done so accordingly. So now, the sad news of the demise of Professor George Albert Omori Magoha, the scholar who gave an astounding service to the education sector in Kenya, was received with shock and sorrow at the Ministry of Education, where he served as the Cabinet Secretary. On behalf of the Ministry of Education, I wish to express my heartfelt condolences to the family, friends, colleagues, and all stakeholders in the education sector for this terrible loss which befell our nation on January 24, 2023. Professor Magoha's experience and work ethic endeared him to many in the ministry, especially his unfiable qualities of hard work, integrity, and boldness. Professor Magoha always reminded many of us a lesson that he learned from his mother, that he needed to be self-reliant, including being able to perform the so-called manual course by himself. During his service at the Ministry of Education, many of those he interacted with were embraced and touched by his service to the neediest and vulnerable children and households. He never shied away from visiting the inside of informal settlements in all parts of the country to find children who had failed to report to Form 1. He could then personally escort them to their schools before finding sponsors for their education. Professor Magoha was a visionary and a transformative leader who was always determined to move the country's education sector forward. Indeed, the education sector is the poorer without him. We must seek to continue to emulate his work ethic and re-engineer the education sector to achieve more and keep the trajectory he envisioned. Particularly, we must keep the spirit of tenacity and the focused approach that Professor Magoha embroidered in his work, and undertake me and my entire work, the Principal Secretary and the entire team in the Ministry of Education, that indeed we will not be able to lower the bar. That I promise the Kenyans. To the family, Dr. Papura Magoha, son Dr. Michael Magoha, the extended family, friends, colleagues, and peers, we must remember that those we have held in our arms for a little while, we hold in our hearts forever. Take comfort in the fact that there are many of us who are with you, through this difficult time, and that the sorrow you feel in your heart will be lightened by the love that surrounds you. May God Almighty let the soul of Professor George Albert Magoha in eternal peace. Thank you, and with this now, I want to invite my colleague, Eliud Ugwaro, who will be able to make a statement on behalf of the Statement of Kenya and on behalf of His Excellency the President, Dr. William Samoei Ruto. Doctor, my friend, welcome. Thank you.
The Magoha family and the church, good afternoon. Before I proceed, I seek your indulgence. I want to donate half a minute of my time to Professor Njuguna Ndung'u as a former colleague of Professor Magoha all the way from the university, just to say something about Professor.
Thank you very much, CS Owaro. God is good, and all the time. Thank you very much. I just said I need to say a word because I come a long way with the family of Professor Magoha, the late Professor Magoha. For me, he has been a friend, he has been a colleague, and he has been my boss. So I think I combine so many aspects. I do remember that our young kids were actually praying together, Michael and my daughter. Michael was much slightly older than my daughter, and we were neighbors for several years. And after that, the first person who gave me leave of absence to leave the university and join the central bank was Professor Magoha. But I had a price to pay. That is why I like to eulogize him as one of the master of excellence. He always reminded me to bring my publications to him because I was on leave of absence. My publications had to reflect that, and they had to be in the university website. So when I was in the central bank, he would call me that he's coming for my publications, but I would tell him that you are still my boss. I have to come and bring my publications. The beauty about it is that he remembered even the journal articles and where I published and even the conclusions I made. That has remained. And even when he became the CS for education, I always called upon him to how do we restructure our education system. For me, being a member of the university, I know the pains he went through. But I'm very happy that I've come to eulogize a friend, a colleague, and my boss. Thank you very much. Condolences to the family.
Thank you, Prof. My duty today, Church, is to read a condolence message from His Excellency the President. But before I do that, let me once more pass my very, very sincere condolences to the Magoha family. I've known this family for close to 30 years because I happen to have gone to high school, my A-levels at St. Mary's Yala. And that is in close proximity to that of the Magoha family. So I've known the family for quite a while. Many adjectives have been used to describe Professor, but I just want to espouse a few outstanding issues about him. He believed in discipline. He was also very, very strict. He had no time for mediocrity. I vividly remember sometime way back in the year 2003 when I was doing my postgraduate studies at the University of Nairobi, and he was then the Deputy Vice Chancellor in charge of administration. Then I met him at the car park next to the fountain. He was seated on a piece of stone. So I asked him, Professor, what are you doing here? Then he told me, you know, this car park, we are doing it. We have engaged the services of a contractor to lay cable. But one thing I've learned in the public sector is that
you don't delegate and assume that it will be done. So instead of getting feedback from my subordinates, I've decided to supervise this contractor every day until he finishes the work. That was Professor Magoha for you. He believed in results and he carried that to other facets of his life. He touched many facets of the Kenyan fraternity, the academia, the health sector, and of course, I empathize with the many children in this country whom Professor touched their lives during his stint as the CS for education. Allow me now, ladies and gentlemen, to read the speech, the condolence message from His Excellency the President. Condolence message from His Excellency Dr. William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya and Commander-in-Chief of the Kenya Defense Forces, to the family and friends of the late Professor George Magoha. We mourn the passing of a good man, a loyal servant of the Republic of Kenya, a highly accomplished scholar and a great teacher who gave sound leadership everywhere he worked. Professor George Magoha, with whom I had opportunity to work with, was a distinguished public servant, illustrious administrator, and one of Kenya's exceptional surgeons. He had extensive knowledge and expertise in the health sector and brilliantly deployed them in bettering the lives of other people. Professor Magoha was uncompromising, an academic giant of immense influence, an author, an astute thinker, and a mentor to many. Undoubtedly, our country has lost a hero and a gentleman. Yet despite these enormous accomplishments, Professor Magoha lived a humble life, and this should be a lesson to all of us. His service to the nation will forever guide, shape, and influence many generations. We thank the Almighty God for the magnificent legacy of an exemplary professional and celebrate his tremendous achievements in medicine, in the academia, and in government. Our love, thoughts, and prayers to the family, the academia, the health fraternity, and friends. May the Almighty Lord rest Professor George Magoha's soul in eternal peace. William Samoe Ruto, PhD, CGH, dated this day in Nairobi. Thank you.
Thank you, CS Eleidowalo, and I'd like to now take this opportunity to go to the family, and only two members of the family will be talking today because senior brother John Obade was not able to travel to Nairobi, but he will be at home in Siaya. So it's now my privilege to ask our son, Dr. Michael Magoha, to come and make his remarks.
Afternoon, everybody. Hi. Yeah, I know it's a surprise for all of us, some more than others, but don't look so somber. He would want us to celebrate, and you know, he always likes to be early for everything, so we didn't know it included his death, but you know, we keep moving. I really wondered what I'm supposed to do, because I'm supposed to give a tribute, which means to express your feelings, and I personally find it a bit strange because how do you condense your entire life into 10, 15 minutes with someone? Sometimes it feels a bit insulting, but what would he want? And I've had the chance of writing a few speeches for him. He never read them. He just got the talking points. And he would say I should just speak from my heart and just to be honest. And then the second thing that hit me is, who am I talking to? There are people way above my pay grade. I will never understand what you do. There's my family over there. Hi, guys. All three of them took up a moja. They are friends and family. And then I realized one simple thing. There's one job where I'm the only person who's actually qualified to talk about. And I didn't have to work for this job, and that's being his son. And in keeping with his memory, because we all have to celebrate. Don't worry, relax, relax. I'll explain what it meant to be his son. A couple of things people don't realize. All through my life, if I ever needed my dad, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. I'm okay. He would want me to do this alone. He was available. It didn't matter if he was a surgeon, if he was a cabinet secretary. And that's because he believed in family. And it was always the same. One phone call. If he can talk, he talks immediately. If he can't talk, immediately he finishes, he would come to me. And that's for 38 years of my life. And it's funny, I'm happy people touched upon it, because I used to get the usual questions of, how is it being raised by this Kali person, etc. I never saw that person. I'm the same with my mom. That's why I really love this picture. This is all I saw. He just smiled, and to put it very simply, he always just kept it very simple. Just, they kept telling me all the time, I don't know if they even realize this, all they said is just do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. It's that simple. And that's all he did. And it's great watching him over time. Everybody always talks about his successes. But I'm blessed because I got to see when he failed. And I realized everybody forgets when he failed. Because I saw how he reacted. And what hits me more, if I feel like that, the person who knows a lot more is my mom. Because as I have a child now, by the time it reaches your child, it's really stressing you. Do you know what I mean? It's stressing you. And I'm grateful for that. So I won't take too much time. The person who needs to take the most time is the person who spent the most time with him. But I'll just say 3 things that I hope everybody can take away. Number 1, family is the most important thing. You never know when you have time. He knew it. He gave me time. And he always did what he was supposed to do. A CS who still gave lectures at the university, because yes, my name is there. There was never pomp or ceremony. The funny thing is he never looked for any of the offices. All he ever did was what he was supposed to do. And if he saw that there was something that was wrong, he just continued. If the office looked ugly, it's like, this office has to be revamped. Where do I get money? If there are too few doctors, how do we organize doctors? And then pop, pop, pop. And whenever he got an office, the other thing I remember is he was always waiting to retire. He was waiting to leave. The discussions were, what's going to happen when I leave the university? Next he's appointed somewhere. Next he's appointed somewhere else. And that makes me feel strange because I spoke to him, well, I was with him all through. But when I was talking to him before, I was really talking to him about, sorry, there's too much on my mind. We share several offices, so that's a very strange thing. And we have the same name, so every now and then I get a text that's meant for him, which I thought was very funny. And since we're always honest to each other, I thought that was just, it was quite funny that I could always see where he was going and how he was trying to take care of me, or what he was struggling with, or how he hid it. I could go on and on because it's 36 years, but 2 stories come to mind. One was, we were sitting with him in the house, I was struggling with something, and I came to him, and he reminded me a story which I completely forgot. I was just in high school, I was in boarding, and you know how children now, you compare yourself to other children. So I had clothes, but I didn't have the cool clothes that all the other children were wearing, and they had many of them. And I remember telling him, Dad, can I get more of this? Then he just smiled. He's like, just go up to your room, put the clothes that you have. Then he gave me some time. Then I went there. We're talking about tracksuits, because that was the cool thing at the time. I had 2 of them and 2 pairs of shoes. I was like, everybody had like 5. So he's like, do your friends have these? I'm like, no. Do your friends have these shoes? He's like, no. But he's like, but they have many. Sindio? I'm like, yes. So he started laughing, and that's actually what I miss, his laugh. And it was really heavy. Then I was wondering, why are you laughing? And then he said, what you do is tomorrow, you go to school, you tell all those friends who have all those clothes, ask them why they're wasting so much money buying so many clothes, that they should look to you only has 2 that are lasting for this long, and you go and tell them this exact thing. I'm sorry that you have to do so much for other people, but look at me, I'm the standard. So if you have these, then you're okay. So those are the small things I think about. He made me realize, stop comparing, just do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. It's that simple. Everybody makes it seem so hard. But if you tell somebody the truth, they won't be happy. But if you're doing it properly, that's it. Trust in God. The same quote that's in one of our desks, for the Lord did not give us a spirit of fear, but of faith, hope, love, and sound mind. And that's what my dad is. He was always hope. And that will continue. I think, like I keep saying, I can just keep on going. But the last one, this one goes to everybody. Towards the end, one quick note. I have to say this for the doctors. How many professors do you know that most of their mentees are professors? You know, it's a small thing. If you're in medicine, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Those are the people who came to support and help me. Always his mentees. He spent time with them. Every one of them has an individual relationship. A lunch, a coffee, a phone call, a funeral, a wedding. And that's what impresses me, because that takes time. It takes time to be human and spend time with people. That's one thing we're all missing. So forget pomp, ceremony, anything. Spend time with people. That's what he would want you to remember. Talk to the person next to you. Find out what's going on with their children. Just spend time with them. And he kept telling me this thing. If there's somebody behind you, somebody stands behind you, what do? You protect them. If somebody stands beside you, regardless of what they believe, their creed, their politics, anything, if they have decided to stand beside you, you respect them. It's literally that simple. And the last one, which he told me, if anybody stands in front of you to push you back, then it's fine. You smile and you look at the people beside you and behind you, and you show them the strength that you have now. So with that, and you trust in God, you'll be okay. So if we all do that, I think we can all be better. We can honor his memory. It's good he did all of those things, but he only reached there because he kept it simple. Do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. Thank all of you for coming to spend time and see my dad rest and spend time with the family. We'll still be here. Hopefully we'll become friends. Regardless of wherever you are still who you are. So God bless you all. Thank you.
Well spoken, Michael. We're coming to the end now, and Dr. Odudu Barbara Magoha, may I request that you make your way up here for your final tribute.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today, a vision of 1980 has finally come true. It is a vision about my 2 parents, my father's 2 friends, and my father-in-law. And this is what took place. My husband, George Magoha, came to Nigeria in 1972. I had a scholarship the same year before finishing O-level to study medicine. My father disapproved of me applying for that scholarship. He told me I was blocking the poor. A few months after, my father passed on in 1973. I had to get that scholarship guaranteed by his friend. That's the number one friend he had. When my mom went there, the man said, I needed to see your daughter before I can guarantee the scholarship. When we went there with my mom, he took a look at me and said, and gave my mom a dressing down of the century. He said, this one will never come back to this country. Why do you want the government to imprison me? My mom went to the office crying, and a junior officer guaranteed. And he said, by the time she finishes, I would have retired or been dead, so they can't get me to repay this money. I never knew why I never traveled out of the country, because it was a full scholarship up to this day. Everybody knows that my husband was supposed to go to Zambia to do medicine. But at the last minute, he came to Lagos. We met, and after 1 month, as I said, he started telling people we are getting married. We settled that. Then I went to my mom. I said, this is the man I want to marry. And my mom said, you give me some time. I'll talk to you. What happened was that my mom went and stayed fasting and praying for 3 days, and she said she was never going to leave the church until she had an answer. On the third night, my mom had a vision in 1980 that George Albert Obare Omore Magoha was destined to be a great man, and that he needed me, and she had to allow me to get married to him. So my mom came back crying and said her hands were tied. But she gave my husband 2 conditions. The first one was that I had to finish my undergraduate studies. The second one was that if he married her daughter, he had to marry her too. And he asked me, what was that about? I said, it meant from now on, I've transferred responsibilities to you. You take care of my mom, you bury my mom if she goes before you. Since 1989, my husband made sure he paid for my mother's air ticket every year until she passed on in 2008. My mom became a spiritual godmother to my husband. And that is why when my mom passed on, my husband thought his life was over. When the promotion started, each time my mom came, we said, not yet, still more coming, every year. Until she passed on, she kept on telling him, still more coming, still more coming. And everything she said came to pass. With all that has happened, I believe my mom's vision has finally come true 43 years after. The second friend of my father was a urologist. he made sure my husband was a urologist. Professor Mposon from the University of Ibadan. Will you call that destiny? Will you call the way we met? And the fact that my father-in-law, my late father-in-law, moved us from the ancestral home to Umiru. Things just don't happen. He settled us. From then on, my husband's life has been on 3 pillars. His God that made him, Starehe that molded him, and medicine. Everything of his, he did in medical precision. You take history, which is the problem, you investigate, make a diagnosis, and make a decision. Some people found it odd. We medics, we don't have time for storytelling. It's either this or that. And you go to theater. When you go to theater, when you come out, relatives are waiting. The first thing is, how was the surgery? Among those relatives, there are people who wish the operation never succeeded because they had their own timetable. And then there are those who are truly happy that the operation succeeded. So all the things my husband did, it was like having dinner with the devil. Devil in the sense that they say when you're having dinner with the devil, you use a long spoon so that your 2 fingers don't touch each other. You don't know what the devil has put in his nails so that they touch you, and when you take to your mouth and you eat, it will be over. So in the morning, when the devil is calling you to find out if you are dead, he asks you, your voice has changed, just to make sure that you are the same one. And you answer back and say, no, it is that nice food of yours that has made my voice to change. Thank you very much for making me have such a good meal with you. So he always prepared for the battle. That's why they say he was obsessed with success. Because each time you pass one battlefield, you prepare for the other. After all, life itself is battle. I'll never complain. I had him for 40 years. I'll be very ungrateful if I did that. There are people who have had marriages of lesser years. I thank God, and I have accepted. We were a team. He looked over my back, and I looked over his. In marriage, we all know there's nothing like 50-50. There's always one person sacrificing more than the other. It could be 40, 70, but everything just came to 100. We understood that. And as a couple, we worked through that. The fact that a vision was made did not mean that everything was going to be smooth. He was not perfect, neither was I. Neither did we have a perfect relationship. But we worked through it, knowing that marriage is about 80-20. 80% meaning what the two of you share in common. The other 20% is what may divide you. So we increase the 80% and reduce the 20% in our lives to make it 0.2%. And in that way, we had a perfect marriage. My husband did surgery up to the end. 2 hours, I turned from Mrs. to a widow. He was okay He was not sick. We talked. He went on the day of, on the 24th of January. He went out, bought things, to buy things for the late brother's funeral. At 2 o'clock, he told me he was chesty. I told him to rest, due to the stress, that he should rest. At 2:30, he asked me for a cough mixture, and I just pointed to him, my own cough mixture. I pointed to him and walked away because I was ironing to go to work. And one thing I liked about my husband is that he allowed me to grow. So my professional career was something of importance to him. So I ironed to go to work. While ironing, I heard him calling me in a stressful voice. When I went, I found out that he had collapsed and his head was almost knocking on the wall. I put my hand to the wall, and then his tongue was coming out, and I pressed down the tongue for some fresh air. I called the workers who were there. I screamed, and they come, and he got revived, put him on the floor. When he woke up, he said, "I want to see my son." That's when I knew something was not going right, because if he had said, "Call me Mike," that's different. Then he said, "Call me my son." 2 weeks earlier, he had said, if anything ever happened to him, I should call Professor Mwanda. So when I revived him the first time, I called Professor Mwanda, and I told him, "Please, I need to see you urgently in my house." I didn't tell him what was wrong. I didn't want to cause an accident. Then I called my son. I asked him, "Where are you?" He said, "I'm in theater. What, are you operating or assisting?" He said he was operating. I said, "Please hand over. Your father is not feeling fine. I think you better just come quietly." And he came. So when my son arrived, my husband spoke to my son. My son said, "Okay, fine." When he arrived, I said, "Your father has had a heart attack, and but now it looks better." He said, "There's no problem. You must be on admission." "Where are your tracksuits?" He's the one who pointed out the tracksuits to my son, and then my son started making all the emergency calls. Sat up, drank, talked a bit, and then said he wanted to go for a long call. He was assisted. He went for the long call. Then Professor Mwanda came in, and he is the one who said, "Oh, you've arrived. Please check my blood pressure." As the blood pressure was being checked, he had the second attack, and was rushed down there. And I think it must have been one of the most stressful things for my son when he had the third attack, knowing the implications of having a third attack. And when he finally had the fourth one, he passed, and all this happened within 2 hours. Just like a surgeon operates, finish, it's over. The following day, I dreamt he asked me, the way we used to have our discussions, pulling a seat and asking me, "What do you think I would have done in this situation?" It was best for you. It was best for me. I woke up and I said, "I set you free." That is the story of Judge Albert Omare Magoha. Magoha, son of Magoha, has exited the stage when the ovation was loudest. Thank you for celebrating his life with me.
Thank you very much, my sister, for being strong in the midst of so much turmoil. We come to the end now. After this, there will be viewing of the body. There's a tent which has been set aside for that. And I'd like to request that as you file out, if you wish to go and view the body, you'll be guided by a team of ushers who are out there to do that function. Let me now request Dr. David Gidanga, I don't know if he's here, to give the vote of thanks, and immediately after giving the vote of thanks, we'll hand the program back to the church. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Barbara, Michael, and the wider Magoha family, and distinguished pilgrims. We're all pilgrims in keeping with the theme for today. Give them eternal rest, O Lord, and may perpetual light shine on them forever. No duty is more urgent than that of returning thanks. I'm acutely aware of the need to vacate the shrine. There's a service taking place shortly. That notwithstanding, and at the risk of inadvertently missing out a few people, you'll be placated by a lady called Doris Day, who observed, gratitude is riches. Complaint is poverty, even if that gratitude is implied. So please feel thanked if I miss you out. First off is to thank God for enabling us to be in this chapel or in this shrine for this ceremony. You can't take it for granted. Secondly is you all for sparing a whole morning, your resources, time, moral support to support the family of Professor Magoha. Medical personnel at the Nairobi hospital, when this call came, people lined up and actually waited at the accident and emergency, a whole retinue of people of different specialties to receive Professor on that fateful day. While here, I wish to thank the medical personnel in general, as well as Michael's own classmates and friends who have continued to remain with him in this very difficult time, and hope that they will remain to be with him in the next coming weeks. I think Professor Mwanda has been talked about quite closely, and he was summoned, and he's obviously close to Professor. And in quick tow, in his own right, is Michael Magoha. These two found themselves in doing a cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and for those of you who have the misfortune of having to do that, you require certain conditions. When you have to do it in a home setting, it's difficult, let alone when you have to do it in a moving car. It's not very easy. When you have a man larger than life who is your father and you're resuscitating, is even more of a horror. So Michael, you've done well, and we commend you. Barbara was part of that too. Remember, you are medical. When are you medical? When are you a wife? When are you a son? It's not very easy. And what makes that a little bit uneasy is that little voice in the doctor's head, that little voice in the head that says root cause analysis. All doctors are analyzing what decisions were made. Could this have been done? If this was done 2 minutes before, and you carry that burden, and they will carry that burden, and let's stop that small little root cause analysis that we all think about. We are all wiser at 2020 post-event, 2020 vision. Michael, your dad is proud of you as a doctor. It's the whole family of Rotary, and especially the ladies. I'm not saying the men are not important, but Elizabeth Kim Kung has been, Anne Van Lowe, Sally Gitoho, Beatrice Kitanui, Jessica Kazina, Josephine Ojambo. They've been round about Barbara, really supporting her in this very difficult time. There's a whole community of West Africans residing in Nairobi who've been very supportive. Leave Funeral Home for professionalism and extreme kindness at a very difficult time. The church and the clergy of the Nairobi Hospital Chaplaincy, Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish, and this shrine Of special mention today is our main celebrant of this Requiem service, our Bishop, Most Reverend Philip Anyolo, who is the Archbishop of Nairobi, like you will know, and his supporting ministers. The administration has been here and has been thanked, led by Permanent Secretary Raymond Omolo, who continue to facilitate movements and security here and at home. We thank you. National Police Service did a wonderful job yesterday as traffic marshals, as all this carnival went across the city. We thank you. A self-improvement writer, Melody Beatty, said, "Gratitude unlocks the fullness of life. It turns what we have into enough and more."